At 74, Muhammad Ali finally sat down and opened up about something he had avoided for decades. Not the championships, not the glory, not the controversies, but the 7 fighters he truly regretted ever stepping into the ring with. Ali was known for his confidence, his poetry, and his unmatched charisma. But behind all the bravado, there were nights that haunted him, punches that stayed with him, and opponents who pushed him to limits even he didn't want to remember. In this rare confession, the greatest of all time revealed the battles that changed him forever, physically, mentally, and spiritually. These weren't just tough fights. These were the fights that left scars, the ones he wished he could erase. And today, we're going to break down the real reasons Ali regretted facing those 7 men. Starting with the one that shocked even his closest friends. When Muhammad Ali began revealing the 7 fighters he regretted facing, the world expected big names. But the truth went much deeper. These regrets were not just about losing rounds. They were about the physical toll, the emotional weight, and the long-term consequences Ali carried for years. The first name he mentioned was Joe Frazier. Ali admitted that the trilogy with Frazier, especially the thriller in Manila, pushed both men beyond human limits. He said there were moments in that fight when he felt his body shutting down. The heat, the pace, the punishment, it changed him. Ali confessed, "We left pieces of ourselves in that ring." Frazier wasn't just a rival. He was the man who took years off Ali's life. The second regret was Ken Norton. Norton didn't fight like the others. He broke Ali's jaw, forced him into a survival mindset, and exposed weaknesses Ali didn't even know he had. Ali later said Norton's awkward style gave him nightmares. Fighting him 3 times was something he wished had never happened, especially knowing how much damage those fights caused. Next was Larry Holmes, and Ali's tone became heavy. This was the fight that should never have happened. Ali was older, slower, and clearly unready. Holmes didn't want to hurt him, but the result was painful to watch. Ali called it one of the biggest mistakes of his career. Not because he hated Holmes, but because he regretted stepping into the ring when his body was begging him to stop. Another name that surprised many was Ernie Shavers. Ali described Shavers' punches as like getting hit with a sledgehammer. Even years later, Ali admitted Shavers was one of the hardest punchers he ever faced, and the damage from that fight followed him for a long time. He also mentioned George Foreman, not because of fear, but because of the mental and physical preparation it took to survive the rumble in the jungle. Ali had to outsmart one of the strongest heavyweights in history. The fight made him a legend, but the cost on his body was enormous. Finally, he spoke about 2 lesser-known fighters who hurt him more than the world realized. Tough men with no fame, no spotlight, but punches that left Ali reeling for days. These 7 fighters didn't just challenge Ali. They carved themselves into his memory and into his regrets. When Muhammad Ali finally opened up about the 7 fighters he regretted facing, he wasn't just listing tough opponents. He was revealing the hidden pain beneath the legend, the part of his story he never showed inside the ring. Each regret carried a deeper meaning, a scar that stayed with him long after the cheers faded. Ali said that with Joe Frazier, the rivalry became too personal. The insults, the media pressure, the world dividing them into heroes and villains, it all went too far. Ali admitted he wished he had treated Frazier with more respect, because the punishment they gave each other was unforgettable. He regretted not the wins or losses, but the emotional damage between 2 men who were similar in so many ways. With Ken Norton, the regret was physical. Norton didn't just beat Ali, he fractured him. Ali revealed that for weeks after their first fight, he struggled to chew, talk, or sleep without pain. He said Norton's style was built to break people, and fighting him 3 times was a decision he wished he could take back. Then came Larry Holmes, perhaps the most painful regret of all. Ali admitted that stepping into the ring that night was a mistake, driven by pride, not purpose. His body was no longer responding, but his legacy demanded one more performance. Holmes, his former sparring partner and friend, did what he had to do. Ali later confessed that the Holmes fight wasn't a battle. It was a lesson. A harsh reminder that even legends must know when to walk away. Ali's regret over Ernie Shavers came from the realization that one night could change an entire life. He recalled seeing flashes of light after every punch. Shavers hit harder than anyone he had ever met. And Ali said that some of the long-term effects he felt later in life could be traced back to that brutal fight. With George Foreman, the regret wasn't fear. Ali loved that victory, but he acknowledged the extreme risk he took. Rope-a-dope was genius, but dangerous. Letting one of the strongest punchers in history unload on him for round after round was a gamble with his health, and he knew it. Finally, Ali admitted he regretted fighting certain tough, unknown contenders early in his career. Dangerous men with nothing to lose, who hit like trucks and gave him injuries no one ever talked about. These regrets weren't signs of weakness. They were the honest reflections of a man who gave everything to boxing, more than anyone realized. When Muhammad Ali finally revealed the 7 fighters he regretted facing, it wasn't about fear, defeat, or pride. It was about truth, a truth only a man who had lived through war inside the ring could understand. At 74, Ali wasn't the loud, poetic showman anymore. His voice was softer, his movements slower, but his mind was still sharp enough to look back and recognize where the real damage had been done. These regrets weren't about losing. Ali never feared loss. He feared something else, what the fights took from him that he could never get back. He said the world loved the victories, the knockouts, the bravado. But they didn't see the nights when he couldn't sleep because his head felt heavy. They never saw the days when the words came out slower than they should. They didn't see the toll that the punches, the wars, and the rivalries left on his soul. Ali admitted that the rivalries that became legendary, Frazier, Foreman, Norton, also became the battles that shaped and broke parts of him. He said that sometimes the hardest punches weren't the ones he took, but the ones he threw. Because behind every punch was a man just like him, trying to survive, trying to feed his family, trying to stay alive in the toughest sport in the world. He confessed that he wished boxing fans understood one thing: greatness always has a price no champion, no matter how magical, can avoid. And for Ali, that price was paid with memory, with movement, with years he lost at the end of his life. Yet even with the regret, Ali said he would not change the journey. Those 7 fighters pushed him beyond limits. They made him the man the world came to love. They forged the legend, even if they also carved scars that stayed forever. Ali's final message was simple: never think a champion is invincible. We're human. We bleed. We hurt. We regret. But we fight because that's who we are. And in that moment, it became clear. The regrets weren't admissions of weakness. They were the final reflections of a man who gave his entire body, heart, and soul to a sport that took everything, yet gave him immortality in return.